Croeso to Wrexham News. I'm Councillor Carrie Harper.
I'm Councillor Marc Jones.
So today we are going to cover the quite seismic poll that's recently come out, which shows some quite dramatic changes potentially for the next Senedd election. We are also going to do a bit of an update. There are things we've covered on previous podcasts, things like Penley Hospital and the local development plan, where we've got a few updates to share with people as well. Yeah. So we're going to go back and cover those. But we're going to start with this poll.
Yeah, and it was quite a game changer. We've been neck and neck with Reform and Labour for a while, slightly ahead in one. But this puts us way ahead of Reform and 12% ahead of Labour. And things are really starting to come off the rails for Labour, you feel? I
mean, looking at these stats, I've just got the poll in front of me. We'll put a graphic up so people can see as well. But it puts, for Senedd voting intention, Plaid Cymru on 30%, Reform UK on 25%, Labour on 18%, and the Tories on 13%. So it shows Labour's vote has collapsed, and the Tory vote has collapsed as well.
And what's clear is that the Tory vote is going to Reform, and the Labour vote is going towards Plaid.
Yeah.
And that is a very clear dynamic that, you know, basically your more left-wing, pro-independence, younger voters seem to be coming towards Plaid, and the Tories are just imploding and going to Reform. And the Tories are getting to a stage now where if they go much lower, they won't get seats full stop.
No, and what's really interesting when you dig down into the data and the age groups as well is what that's saying. So we're ahead of Labour in every age group.
Yep.
You know, this has never happened before. This is quite a shift, isn't it? But then if you look sort of under 50s are more likely to support Plaid Cymru, over 50s and 65 plus more likely to lean towards Reform and the Tories. So you see in this polarisation.
Yeah, it's a generational thing, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's in this set of data, but we've seen it in other polling, we've seen it in other sets of data and things as well, haven't we, over quite a few months now?
Yeah, I mean, there is some people are trying to say, it's an outlier, but if you look at the Yes Cymru poll, which showed, you know, a growing support for independence.
It was 41%, I think, wasn't it?
But even more in certain circumstances, and certainly in that under 50 group, you know, you've got a real shift going on. The under 35, was it?
It was 24 to 35 was 72% in favour of independence, which is...
No, that's crackers.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's quite scary.
It's great, but it's a massive change and a massive shift, isn't it?
So, and it, you know, to be honest with you, you sense it, you know, but that there's something very big going on now, I think, and the whole choice is becoming very stark between, do you want Reform and that kind of backward-looking
right
wing, you know, very unpleasant sort of politics, or are you looking for something more progressive, something that's going to put Wales and Welsh communities first every time? And you know, younger people are definitely making the decision, aren't they?
I think that's the one thing that jumps out, is how important it's going to be for younger people to actually turn out and vote, because their view in terms of the Wales that they want to see going forward is actually quite drastically different to the older generation, generally speaking, looking at this data.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've got to be, as older people, we've got to be very mindful that the decisions we potentially in the Senedd make is going to impact on younger people for decades to come. And, you know, everything, whether it's jobs, housing, you know, the environment, all these things really are going to make a difference, I think, in the way people decide to vote. And obviously that shift is already happening.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of seeing polls like this, they themselves then shape the narrative, don't they? Because I know over the last few days we've had people getting in touch asking about how they can get involved with Plaid. They want to support Plaid, they want to stop Reform, they want to actually get involved, and to have that a year out from an election is really interesting. I've not seen that before, not to this extent.
No, it does feel, you know, when you've got random people almost approaching you, whether it's in the pubs or online, and that's a really positive feeling you're getting, you know. And I think people are realising this is a really important election. I think it's incredibly important on a Welsh-wide basis because it's got that potential, like 1999, to be that
even more so, I think,
seismic shift, you know? Because if we get a Plaid Cymru First Minister, if we get a Plaid Cymru-led government for the first time ever, alongside the Scottish situation, which is, again, going in a positive way, in terms of what could happen in Ireland in the next 5 or 10 years, I think we're in a really interesting dynamic. And I'll put it out there. I don't know what Reform are going to plan to do, but they're an English nationalist party. Will they wrap themselves in the dragon flag, the St George's flag, or will they try and embrace Britishness? I don't know. I don't really care. But they are really going to face a difficult situation, I think.
No Welsh leader, no Welsh policies. They're looking at this election as just a lever, basically.
Oh, yeah.
As part of a run-in for them for the next UK general elections in 2029. They're not really bothered, are they?
No, it's a stepping
for
stone.
Them. Yeah, that's how they see it. But in terms of details, in terms of what they'll offer Wales, we've heard nothing, absolutely nothing from them.
It'll be more of the same 3-word slogans, won't it? They'll keep banging on about stop the boats when
immigration policy is not devolved.
They'll talk about welfare benefits, and welfare benefits are not devolved, and all these sort of things. Criminal justice not devolved, and sooner or later, people are going to wake up to the fact that they're offering nothing except the slogans. Yeah.
So Labour's reaction to all this has been interesting.
Blind panic? Would it be fair to say that?
I did see some of Eluned Morgan's speech, which came out on the same day as the poll. Don't think that's a coincidence, obviously. And the main theme that they were trying to get out there was the Red Welsh Way, I think.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Well, yeah. I mean, the first few sentences were really, I heard her say, Labour's delivered for the last 26 years. And you're thinking, yeah, but they haven't, and that's the problem.
What parallel universe is that?
Exactly. Yeah. Look at the NHS, look at fair funding for Wales, look at education. The problem Labour have got is the fact that people don't think that they've delivered. And there didn't really seem, there was no acknowledgement of that.
No, the only thing Labour have delivered of late is stuff that Plaid Cymru has put forward as part of the cooperation agreement, where we've got free school meals through. And that's really made a difference to people's, budgets. If you've got kids in primary school and you want to see that rolled out, they've run out of ideas. All they can do is manage things. And if they think they've done a good job over 26 years, then they are really in for a shock, aren't they? I think that's the real thing. And what they do, of course, is they when they're under attack, they park their tanks on Plaid Cymru's lawns.
Well, this was quite funny, right? So they're trying to out-Plaid Cymru, right? They even had a line, and this was fairly early on in the speech, that they are the party of Wales. Oh, really? And you're thinking, well, you'd have to point to some examples. Where have you been, the party of Wales? Because certainly not on devolving the Crown Estate. Labour MPs voted against that. Not on HS2.
Yeah.
They've just flatly failed, haven't they, to stand up for Wales on any occasion that you can point to.
And there was that big, two governments working together in partnership, all that bluster. And 10 months down the line, she's having to say, they're not listening to us. And the reality is, they're not listening to you because you're irrelevant. Starmer doesn't give a monkeys about Wales. He is only bothered about maintaining power in London, and frankly, Wales is always going to be irrelevant to that. Yeah,
and you've got that sort of split even within Labour in Wales in terms of some of the Senedd members and the MPs in their outlook. A lot of them are not pro-devolution particularly, are they? No. So Eluned Morgan goes to Keir Starmer and says, winter fuel allowance, disability cuts, and it's sort of, whatever, Eluned, see you in 6 months.
Yeah.
They really just don't care. So, you do... As far as you can have sympathy for her, she's sort of rock and hard place in terms of...
She made the choice...
it's of their own making.
Yeah, she's made a choice to try and big up the relationship. She's made the choice to be in Labour. And if you can't deliver, you've got to get out of the way.
Well, exactly. I suppose she's coming in after the whole Von Gethin scandal as well. You've got a Senedd group that's pretty divided by all accounts. and you've got a Labour government in London that couldn't care less what you think. So in that sense, it's very difficult to see where they can go after that.
I mean, it's difficult to see how a Labour government with such a landslide could have made such a mess of it.
God, it's so wrong. But when you're knocking doors, you can see why. Because, I mean, winter fuel allowance, even a year later,
still bugs people.
People are pissed off.
Yeah.
You know, it's still tangible on the doorstep when you're talking to people about that. And then to have the disability cuts afterwards. I think once you've annoyed people to that extent, it's really, really
they don't
difficult.
Get unannoyed, do they?
No. Not that there's any sign of any, reverse ferrets on the way on either of those things either. But
No. And you look at, health, people can see for themselves. There's all this talk about waiting lists coming down and we're dealing with the dentistry crisis. And you're going, people are not seeing that in their day-to-day lives. They know the reality is very, very different. And that you get the sense that they're massaging things because they can't face the reality, so they're having to try and spin their way out of it. And nobody's being taken in by the spin anymore.
No, and we're seeing this with some of the waiting list stuff as well, aren't we? Where this is about massaging the numbers rather than genuinely
I mean,
backlogs.
I'm dealing with a case now where somebody got a letter to say, you've been on this waiting list for a while. Are you still ill, basically? Do you want to stay on the waiting list?
Yeah.
If so, can you give us a ring? Otherwise, we'll take you off. And you're thinking,
you've got to proactively try and stay on a waiting list now. That's not the same as clearing waiting lists.
That's not dealing with the issue. That's dealing with the figures and trying to massage them down without treating people. People need treating. People need sorting, rather than just playing with figures.
Yeah, and we'll come back to health again and again. But I mean, the main headlines for this poll, things have polarised so much, that's what this is showing, that if people want to stop reform, the answer is to vote Plaid Cymru.
Yeah.
That's there now in the data. The Labour vote is just collapsing in the midst of all this. So there's going to be quite dramatic change next May, looking at what's coming down the road.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that the two traditional big London parties have only got 30% of the vote between them. Yeah. And I think that proportion is going down because people have seen through them. Because the Tories gave us austerity, they collapsed public services, attacked the NHS. Labour's come in or been in power in Wales and done nothing about it. And they've continued that. So we were saying, Labour, Tory, same old story. They want to change. They want a real change. Some are looking to Plaid, others are looking to reform. That is going to be a head-to-head battle.
It will be next year, but I think what's really interesting is what you're seeing through those age groups is that there's a trend there that means there's a direction of travel which is much more Welsh identified, much more pro-independence, much more pro-Plaid Cymru. This isn't a response to one thing on its own. This is a collective shift across Wales. That's what it feels like. That's what the data is telling us. That's actually really exciting.
It is, and it makes you realise, I think that Labour vote was always vote Labour to keep the Tories out. How many times did we hear that? Well, now the Tories are no longer a threat. There's no real reason to vote Labour.
No. And for people who want to get involved in the campaign locally, really easy. Join the party. We'll put some joining links up in the comments. And drop us a line at plaidwrexam@gmail.com. That's Wrexham with a CS. You'll be surprised to hear. And we'd love to have you on board. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's where we're going.
Catch up on a couple of the other issues then, because people may think we do these podcasts, we have a good chat about things, and then what happens next? It can feel like it goes into the ether, but it doesn't. There's work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of following up and trying to get some clarity on different issues. And the first one that comes to mind is the situation with Penley Hospital, which people might remember was last Christmas. So they closed it temporarily on Christmas Eve.
Still closed though.
Still closed. And it genuinely caused a lot of upset. And we heard from staff and from relatives of people who were in the hospital at the time where it had a really negative impact on, and they were quite upset in terms of the way it had all been handled and what was being said publicly, because they were adamant it was down to low occupancy, weren't they? And they said it was a temporary closure, but you've been asking questions for the last few months now.
Yeah, I mean, they said there's only 8 beds there in the first place, and they said there were only 3 occupied. But now because we knew that wasn't true, and we kind of hinted at that last time we spoke, but we've now had confirmation that there were 6 out of the 8 beds occupied.
It's not low occupancy, is it?
Which is a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, another 2 and it would have been 100%. And, you know, that's as much as you can get. So that was one mistruth. What are we going to label it? You know, that was one bit of spin that they tried. The other was that staff hadn't been consulted at all.
No.
You know, they were just told a couple of days before Christmas, basically, you're being redeployed, this is closing temporarily. But we've also found out that the health board itself, the board that runs Betsy, wasn't informed till the day of the closure.
Is that usual? It doesn't sound like it would be.
It strikes me that the management of the Eastern Division is basically pretty autonomous within Betsy, and that's Flintshire and Wrexham.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that they are not communicating either upwards to the board or downwards to the staff. And they're certainly not talking to the patients and their family. So there's a real lack of engagement here. And it's a worry for me. Why are you shutting perfectly good services? Nobody's saying the service wasn't good. Why are you shutting it when there's literally patients in corridors in the mailer?
And we've lost so many community beds because they've got rid of community hospitals anyway over the last sort of
about 15 years. We've lost a lot of,
Fflint and
Llangollen. Before then there was Trevallyn and others. But you're talking about a loss of, it's more than just beds though. These were stepped down. They took the pressure off district hospitals like the Cllr and Wrexham. And that's, you know, I suspect that there's a false economy going on. They think we can save £800,000 a year by closing this.
So they said they're closing it now?
Well, there's no talk about reopening. Let's put it that way. You know, I mean, if you close something temporarily, you should have a plan to when you're going to reopen
Christmas,
it.
Wasn't it? So, yeah.
And it's clear that the staff that have been moved on, some of them have decided, I don't want to work for this health board anymore.
No.
So, you know, that's a loss when we've got so many nursing vacancies. We can't afford to lose a single person. And I just find the whole way it's been dealt with wrong. The centralization of services strikes me as going against what we really want to do, which is to get community care as close to people as possible. You know, and it just beggars belief when you've got so many pressures on the mailer that we're not dealing with it properly.
But just to go back to this low occupancy thing, so that's what they said.
Yeah.
That's not right.
Yeah.
So what's the real reason behind it, do you think, then, from what you've had back from them?
They won't tell you, obviously, they won't tell you straight. I think they needed to make savings before the end of the last financial year so that they would then qualify for more funding. It was that kind of, almost like an accountancy trick, which puts finance before care. And that should never be the case.
No.
You know, and I get that, you know, obviously everybody's got to work to a budget, but and the health board and health in general is having to deal with far more complex cases. We're all getting older. There's always pressure.
But you can't mislead people. That really isn't fair. And especially, you know, like I said, I spoke to, you know, the family of one of those patients, and a really negative impact on that person when they were moved on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And on that family. They were really angry, and the lack of transparency and the misdirection with this just isn't acceptable. Whatever the financial pressures, it's just not. It's not on, really, is it?
No, and they're also trying to say that the cost per bed in Penley is more expensive than in Wrexham Mailer. Now, that's quite an interesting situation. I get it that smaller scale units can be more expensive per bed than large ones. But, you know, you've got specialist equipment in the mailer, you've got specialist consultants and all that sort of thing going on there. I think, again, to my mind, they're massaging the figures to make it look worse. that was costing £800,000 a year. That's not a huge cost in an organisation with a budget of was 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
It's a big old organisation, Betsy, and for me to massage the figures, I think that's probably the kindest way to make it look worse than it was, and not to be open and honest. I've had to go back 2 or 3 times to try and get information from them, and it just strikes you that they're not accountable.
Yeah, I was going to say it's that lack of accountability throughout that whole process and the misdirection.
Yeah.
And they obviously thought that nobody was going to pick up on that, which just doesn't bode well, does it?
Well, yeah, and it leaves a nasty taste. And we used to have a patient's voice, which was a really good proactive voice for the patients, and that's been neutered. That's been downgraded. They don't have that anymore. And although it's there, it can't do these kind of investigations on behalf of patients. And we really need to get back to that. And I'd like to see us as a party back in a more powerful patient's voice if we get elected next year.
It's clearly needed. The other issue, we've discussed this on the podcast quite a few times. People be familiar with the local development plan, the court case, the jail for voting, all the back and two that there's been over the last couple of years with that. And there's a few updates, isn't there? So where we'd got to was at the Court of Appeal, the judges agreed that councillors did have the right not to adopt the local development plan.
And not to go to jail if they
and
disagree.
Not to go to jail, funnily enough. No jail for voting. But the process has dragged on a bit because the Welsh government appealed to the Supreme Court, didn't they?
Yeah.
So
we had to wait for that, which is and it was a real, really odd situation because you'd have thought that it would be the developers who would appeal, but the developers, I think, realised they were on hiding to nothing.
And Wrexham Council, in fairness, as well.
Wrexham Council.
Okay, we're going to leave it there.
So they parked it, and it was just the Welsh government who insisted on going to the Supreme Court, the highest court in Wales and England. And the Supreme Court came back a few weeks ago now and said there is no arguable case.
Yeah.
And
it was quite strongly worded.
It was wasn't it? It was a one-liner. It was not nuanced. It said, you've got nothing new, mate, here to come back to us with. So you've got to wonder if the developers jacked it in, if Wrexham Council officers jacked it in, why didn't Welsh Government jack it in?
Because this is public money, isn't it? And it shouldn't have been a surprise because they went back to the appeal court judges to ask for leave to appeal, didn't they?
Yes, and they refused them.
Yes, they're allowed to go direct to the Supreme Court, but the no from the Court of Appeal should have been an indication that that wasn't really going to get anywhere.
No, so it now starts to smack of something personal, vindictive, and obviously political. Somebody in Welsh Government really doesn't want Wrexham councillors to decide on the local development plan for Wrexham. And we've got a real issue there, I think, in terms of who runs things and why are they running things.
Yeah.
And it goes back to Labour not
listening.
Labour, doesn't listen,
basically.
Doesn't care.
No. Well, I mean, one of the consequences of the Supreme Court saying you can't appeal is that there was an agreement then across, all the groups that were involved that following the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court said no, then the LDP legally would be quashed.
Yeah.
We wouldn't need to go back again to court or to the council to have another vote, or that would be it. It's quashed. So that came through, didn't it? And you think, great, that's the legal process concluded. LDP is dead.
Yeah.
That's that. But...
well, I mean, so obviously you would then continue with the plan that was in place before the LDP, and that's confusingly called the UDP,
which is Unitary
Development Plan. And so that had a different sort of set of goals, basically, and wouldn't have permitted two of the big sites that we are specifically talking about, the two big super estates on either side of Wrexham. And then we find out that the Welsh Government, again, definitely playing the baddie in this role, they've decided to have a mop-up of all the various laws that they say are not now needed.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, the UDP was something they were going to get rid of. And if you've not got an LDP and you get rid of the UDP,
you've got no legal.
Then there's no plan at all.
Yeah, and the only council in all of Wales that would have affected is Wrexham. So they've tried to do this, or they were trying to do this as part of a draft bill that's currently going through, which they'd amended. Am I right in saying that?
No, they were going to put this through. And then, obviously, when we got wind of this, we alerted our Senedd team. Oh,
I thought the UDP was a later amendment to that bill.
No.
The UDP's going. It was included originally.
The UDP was in it. And then it was only when we alerted our team, they contacted Welsh Government. I think Welsh Government then go, right, you're on to us.
Because it wasn't accurate, because it didn't reflect the court case.
Because it was trying to say that we had an LDP, which we don't have.
Which was just been legally quashed.
Yeah. So either their legal department isn't talking to its lawmaking department, which actually would be the same department.
They're just maybe not talking to each other at all.
No. Or maybe,
not talking to Wrexham, are they?
Or maybe they were, again, being vindictive and petty and spiteful in trying to cause problems for...
It would have ripped out the safety net, wouldn't it? That would be the automatic fallback position without an LDP, is to revert back to this other plan. And not least because even the LDP was only meant to run till 2028. So you're only talking about something interim for 3 years until the next plan comes out. So it would be the obvious thing to do. Maybe it's just a coincidence in terms of timing that they were looking to do that just the other week.
Maybe we're just seeing the worst in them, you know. I can't think why.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they've said now that it's been spotted.
Yeah.
That they're going to amend that bit out.
Well, I hope so. But I think it just reiterates that we need shot of this lot, because they are not good for Wales. They're not good for our communities. They will do things out of, personal, I don't know, it's almost malice.
It's really hard to see it any other way, isn't it? You think, okay, surely not, that wouldn't be how things are working at that level. But, why appeal to the Supreme Court? Why do this with the UDPs? It's... it's going to take a lot of convincing that's coincidental.
I'm sure there's a good reason. I'm sure they could justify it.
Well, they're not saying anything wrong. They haven't through the whole process. That's the other thing. Going back to, we're talking about accountability with the Health Board and Penley. The same with this process. Not one Labour minister has been willing to front up and say, we think this plan should happen because of A, B and C. Because they could have imposed it, they didn't have to wait for the council to agree or not agree. They didn't want to do that, didn't want the political comeback from doing that. So they've tried every which way behind the scenes, through the court process, through all sorts of other processes to get their own way. And even when it's quite clear that the court process wasn't going to back them, there's still an element there that just really can't accept that they've lost this argument.
No, they won't let go.
No.
Because they're used to getting their own way, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're used to getting their own way in Wales, and that's what's got to change.
Well, and it certainly won't be happening in Wrexham. No. There we go.